some good news coming out of this pandemic, which are words that seem like they should be incongruous and largely are, but let's just call this a silver lining. Daily carbon emissions are down 17% since the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent lockdowns started. Between January and early April, emissions have declined significantly. When you compare this yearly, if we were to take the models throughout the year and compare it to 2019's averages, this year in 2020, emissions could decline between 4.4% and 8%. And if that's the case, that would be the largest annual decrease in carbon emissions since World War II, which is a stunning figure and goes to show how little this world has done to combat the existential threat of climate change. The study centered on 69 countries, all 50 US states, and 30 Chinese provinces, which account for 85% of the world population and 97% of all global carbon dioxide emissions. The carbon reductions were primarily driven by fewer people driving, which, I had to go in to the city, grab some stuff from my apartment, drove in, like ghost town. This makes a lot of sense, although of course that's anecdotal evidence. Surface transport activity levels dropped 50% by the end of April. The most significant decline in activity occurred in aviation, although not in the United States. You look throughout the US, there's still a lot of flights internationally, and in different countries is a different story. That was a 75% decrease overall, though, in aviation. But it accounts for a smaller slice of global emissions, the study said. This is what can happen and what we can do as a planet, as a society, to restructure our economy in a way that cements this change. And I'm not saying everyone stay at home, but we know that it's possible to transition to a greener economy, to make these reductions fairly cemented and permanent and going down in a way that's actually going to tangibly affect our planet. According to the United Nations environmental projections, to keep global temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to reduce emissions by 7.6% every single year between now and 2030. Now, we kind of stumbled into this, and it's a good thing that emissions are down, but obviously once things do return back to normal, even if that may take much longer than the Trump administration and Republicans are trying to say, it's going to go back up again. There was a similar, but of course not as stark decline during the 2008-09 Great Recession. Global emissions decreased 1.4% in 2009. Then the next year they shot back up 5% as if nothing had changed. So that's something we're going to see once this pandemic concludes, and hopefully we're able to minimize all the death and destruction that it causes. So this is a real opportunity for us to see this decline in emissions and see where we can permanently ensure that decline continues. In industry, in structure of society, and through legislation. So it doesn't help that the United States president doesn't believe in climate change and withdrew from even the most tepid agreement in the Paris Accords at the start of his presidency. If Biden were elected, at least he believes in climate change. And that's one of the reasons I do think that harm reduction in terms of voting patterns are better. But again, I'm not going to shame anyone into voting one way. But this is something that's on the forefront of my mind as November rolls around.